Welcome to Academic Tier 2 Vocabulary. Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Thompson and I'm very excited because I get the opportunity to share with you the why behind using academic vocabulary systematically pre-K-12 in scope and sequence in order to help our students improve their academic performances in all of our classes. So let's get started. As we begin our discussion, it's important for me to point out that vocabulary is classified in 3 different tiers. Those tiers have nothing to do with RTI. We'll begin with Tier 3 vocabulary words. Those are the words most of us already deliberately teach to our students. They are subject-specific words in which students need to know to be able to master the content. Tier 1 vocabulary, on the other hand, are the words and phrases of everyday speech. They are the words that are frequently used. They are usually learned in the early grades. They rarely require direct instruction. And research further shows that if these are the words that we focus on with our EL or special ed students, they usually show no change in achievement. Tier 2 academic vocabulary is not unique to anyone's particular discipline, and therefore, and historically, unfortunately, most of us don't deliberately teach it. We can't expect kids to understand it based on contextual clues. It's frequently encountered in print. These are the words that normally we see in academics in books, and they are widely applicable. So if you use the word in math, chances are it will transfer to science or to a technology class. So our focus again today is the Tier 2 vocabulary. And as you can see by these examples on this slide, these are general academic vocabulary that can be transferred from discipline across discipline. If students do not know exactly what we are asking them to do with these words, however, they will not be able to perform skills, even though they may have the content or the knowledge to do so. It is critical that we deliberately teach, model, and practice academic vocabulary if we are to expect students to be able to show us what they truly know. Moreover, it is the basis of inclusionary instruction. Research tells us that explicit instruction of Tier 2 vocabulary is critical for EL, special ed, and low SES students. Instruction of Tier 2 vocabulary is critical for our special ed, low SES, and EL students. Research, all the way back from 1992, shows us the 30 million word gap from Hart and Risley. Hart and Risley's research found that low SES students had heard only around 14 million words by the age of 4. Middle class students heard around 26 million words, in comparison with students who came from families with professional backgrounds who had heard over 45 million words. This research is extremely critical in that we cannot assume students come to us equipped for understanding this academic vocabulary. We have to deliberately instruct it, model it, and ensure students understand it. The research of Zweers similarly illustrates the importance of academic vocabulary in being able to transfer it into authentic life experiences and life tasks. Zweers argues that people need to understand academic vocabulary as it actually is applied to authentic life experiences. This can be the ability to analyze or evaluate a contract, to be able to debate issues, to find bias, to be able to interpret, to predict, all lifelong skills and all inherent in academic vocabulary. Truly, if you think about it, this knowledge is critical in today's society with the many multimedia formats of news. Students must be able to understand the difference between analyzing and evaluating multimedia formats for bias, to be able to compare and contrast information for a loan, in general, to be able to synthesize information to make a decision. As applied to academics, here's some research way back from 1986. Stahl and Fairbanks looked at a student's score on a reading comprehension test. The student without any vocabulary instruction of Tier 2 words scored at the 50th percentile. The researchers then directly gave instruction of Tier 2 vocabulary to the student. And as a post-test, this student raised his score to 83rd percentile on this test. So again, research does support that this specific and deliberate instruction works. For these reasons, we must all, regardless of the content or level we teach, directly and intentionally instruct Tier 2, which is the academic transferable vocabulary, along with Tier 3, which is content specialized vocabulary. Let's look at a few examples. You'll notice already at grade 2, this is a literacy standard out of the Common Core. Students are asked to be able to understand how to compare and contrast two or more versions of the same story. Here's another example, this time from the Forward Exam Math, grade 6. Take a quick look at this question. So the Tier 2 vocabulary here would be calculate. If the student doesn't understand how calculate fits into the content here, even though she might have the background information or mathematical knowledge to answer this, it's very possible that the word could trip her up. And here's a high school level example from the Forward Exam, Social Studies, grade 10. So the students have to read this excerpt, and then they have to look at the question. So the question is, what was an effect of the Tonkin Gulf resolution? So obviously the word effect, the student would have to know exactly what they were looking for within this content. And of course, academic vocabulary is also used in the encore areas. Here's an overall unit learning objective from a grade 3 STEM class project. I can research, gather, and synthesize information to create a presentation on the pros and cons of solar energy. So there's a lot going on in this particular question or learning target. And of course, Tier 2 vocabulary, we're looking at words research. What does research mean? What does synthesize mean? And then we talk about pros and cons. If students aren't clear on these terms, it's very clear that they don't understand the steps required to get to these learning targets. Here's an example from art. So we have two photos or portraits. The students are asked what adjectives or metaphors would you use to describe the appearance of each artist. So obviously adjectives and metaphors here would be identified as Tier 2 vocabulary. They're not just limited to the English language arts realm. The second point, survey the elements of work to understand the decisions each artist made in order to achieve the desired effects. So if you look at this particular question, what does it mean to survey? What does it mean when we say desired effects? And then the final, compare and contrast, you'll notice compare and contrast here is being used a little bit differently in the content as compared to the reading standard back in 2nd grade of comparing and contrasting two different stories. So again, we have to ensure that students know how we expect them to spiral up these words, use them differently, or add to them as the content around them changes. And here's one more example. This is from AP Language and Composition, a junior level class at the senior high. And here is a writing prompt, which actually came off of the national exam, wherein students were to read and view the video or read the eulogy of Margaret Thatcher that was delivered at Ronald Reagan's funeral. And then the prompt indicated that they had to analyze the rhetorical devices that Thatcher utilized and then evaluate the overall effectiveness of her eulogy. So there's a lot going on here with both Tier 2 and Tier 3 words. Certainly, even your best writers, even your most knowledgeable and mature writers, if they do not understand the difference between the Tier 2 words of analyze and evaluate, they would not perform well on this task. So how do we go about identifying which vocabulary is Tier 2 and which vocabulary is important for us to focus in on? Well, first of all, there is some pretty specific criteria. First of all, it has to be portable or transferable. It's one of those words like compare and contrast that's likely to appear across subject areas and across grade levels, subjects. It's vital to the comprehension of any academic text. It helps students express their academic understanding. So when we think of those words in the DOK, when we say compare, contrast, analyze, synthesize, summarize, those are really performance standards we're asking students to show us. Vocabulary that is essential for participation in academic discussions and writing. And again, it's not typically used by students without explicit instruction. So when we ask students to summarize a new type of content that maybe is more difficult, we have to ensure, A, they understand the steps that are involved in that term, and B, we have to model what it looks like. So as we begin to consider the selection of Tier 2 and Tier 3 vocabulary, we have to remember that the age level of the student and the content are really the main drivers behind this criteria. Other considerations include, does the word belong to a commonly used or frequently used word family? Does it connect to other words or ideas that the students have already been learning? Will it be useful to students in their own writing? Are there multiple meanings based on context? Does the word significantly impact the meaning of a text? Does it illustrate nuance in an author's choice of the text? Will it help students express their understanding of the ideas and the concepts they are learning from the text? And is it likely to appear often in other texts? Academic vocabulary is further important when we talk about a student's success on standardized testing. The Ford exam is directly testing the skills of the Common Core, so again, students must know the academic vocabulary. Here is actually from grades 3 through 8. This is actually taken from grade 3. It's the text-dependent portion of the Ford exam, and it requires students to read a text, and then the prompt actually asks them to respond in one of the two following ways. So in third grade, a third grade student would see this prompt: identify and explain a theme or central idea using textual evidence to support the claim about what the theme or central idea is, or analyze the development of an event, character, central ideas, or theme using textual evidence to support the explanation and analysis. So already in grade 3, we expect students to understand what it means to identify and explain, what it means to find a theme or a central idea, what is textual evidence, what is a claim, what does it mean to analyze. So students are at a disadvantage if they don't understand these words. And this happens frequently for our EL students. So as we take a look to identify the important Tier 2 vocabulary at each grade level and how that spirals from grade level to grade level, in addition to the Tier 3 course content vocabulary, it's really important for us to understand that those two pieces are really what help inform the DOK level, or more specifically, the cognitive rigor of the task we're asking students to perform. I highly recommend that as you start to write your SLO, your building goals, you take a look at Karen Hess's Cognitive Rigor Matrix website. It helps you to understand the key academic vocabulary that is specific to your subject or content area, along with how the Tier 3 content helps to set the level of rigor you're asking students to perform. So we'll take a quick look at one of those matrices. So here's an example of one of the matrix. This one is for career and technical education, and it is basically applying Webb's depth of knowledge to actual cognitive skills that you are asking the students to perform. So if you look on the left side, you have the academic vocabulary listed. So you have words like remember, understand, apply, and analyze. But it's the content that really drives forward what the level of cognitive rigor is. So I can give you an example with Webb's DOK Level 2. If you look down after Webb's DOK Level 2, students have to be able to summarize procedures, results, or concepts. So even though it's at a level DOK2, it could be a very difficult level DOK2. For example, if you were asking the student to summarize a multiple variety of resources, and you were asking them to come up with a main idea, and perhaps those resources were of high level concepts, high level reading. But that's not to say that we wouldn't ask all students to be able to perform those tasks. Here's where you can easily differentiate for students. You want all students to be able to understand what summarization means, but certainly we wouldn't ask a student to read several levels above his or her grade level. We want something that's just challenging enough, but yet something that's achievable. So this matrix can really help you understand what is the level of cognitive rigor, even though, again, it may just be a DOK level 2. It's not just that level in terms of how difficult it is. It could be a very difficult DOK 2. At the same token, you could have a level 3 DOK that could be quite easy. So again, it depends on what you are asking students to do with the specific level of content. And again, that is why students must understand what is behind those Tier 2 vocabulary words. So I hope this information is clear and relevant, and it does explain the why behind why it is so important for us to directly instruct, model, and allow for students to have multiple opportunities to practice this academic Tier 2 vocabulary in conjunction with our Tier 3 or content-specific vocabulary. Research shows us it's directly related to improving student academic achievement gains, and it's of particular importance when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about giving all kids a chance to reach rigorous learning opportunities. So that being stated, after the data retreat with the teacher teams and administrators, a conclusion was made that this is indeed an important strategy for us to use as we work to move literacy forward. And for that reason, we will be supplying a core list. We'll start small with a core list at elementary level, middle school, junior high, and senior high level. Of course, that list could be added to in your specific building, but you will be getting the list very soon. It will be aligned to the Common Core, to the Forward exam, to Lucy Calkins, to Engage New York, as well as those terms that we expect kids to do in the Encore classes. And from there, we will begin to work on strategies. The next video clip will be the 7 types of word acquisition tenets that we know from research about vocabulary acquisition. I will give you the research and the why behind those, and then just a couple of strategies to get you started that you can immediately implement in your classroom. And of course, this is an ongoing conversation. We want to ensure we are improving scope and sequence for the academic experiences of all of our students district-wide. And of course, we can discuss more in the future of how we will measure this and continue to ensure that it is implemented to fidelity. So I look forward to working with you on this endeavor in the future. Thanks.